Hello everyone, welcome back to the Constellation series where this month we're in Cancer. This is certainly not my favorite named constellation ever. You know, usually the C word's god awful and the last thing you ever want to hear. But it still has its place in the zodiac. So first steps into each constellation, I have to look at the stars, you know, and especially their three-dimensional orientation, light, color, all of that good stuff. It's actually a very fascinating deep dive. The research and development is actually one of my favorite parts of the design process. Having so much freedom with this constellation with only a few stars therein, it's so nice to be able to just kind of do my thing around them. If you know much of anything about the zodiac, you think Cancer, it's the crab. I didn't want to make a crab. I didn't want to lean forward with that symbolism. I really took to heart what our first water sign should feel like. And I after some thought, I got it. Have you ever seen when you're looking at the surf on the beach, and you ever see two waves clash and then there's that upward movement and then they kind of fan out a little bit? That's the moment I wanted to capture. I wanted upward movement and then it kind of sprays out almost like a fountain. This was a really fun one to conceptualize. I kind of leaned into seahorse-like aesthetics, just really good upward movement, really trying to capture water. When I hit the drafting table, I'm not just scribbling on paper willy-nilly. No. The steel needs to be precisely what I draw. I need it to be replicable. Once the design was approved, it was time to fire up the forge and truly begin. While you're forging hot, I have about this much space inside of my forge for the scroll. But after that thing cools and normalizes outside, I really like to then take everything to this wedge block where I cold forge the rest of the way because I'm not dealing with any hot spots, any cold spots, because out of the forge, you're looking at a bullseye of heat. At the center, you have great bright yellow forging heat, and then it goes out to orange, and then out to red, and then so on and so forth. So it wants to bend unevenly. When you cold forge, it all goes nice and consistent, and when you're trying to replicate the movement of water, you can't have harsh bends. No. It needs to be nice and consistent. All 12 of these sculptures are getting mounted on top of a beautiful concrete pedestal lined with brick. And I need all of the bases of these sculptures to be relatively standardized for ease of installation. They get mounted at the center so they can turn, so that on site we could really adjust their orientation to the stars perfectly. I start with the 17-inch by 1/4 inch steel disc. And then in my good old trusty roller that is still doing great, I still have yet to rebuild to that tool, roll just a nice, 2 by 1/4 inch band that, makes this thing into a cylinder. Once I had the base established, then it's time to start really putting these forgings into place. Now, there's a lot of difficulty, as you can imagine, going from 2 dimensions to really complex 3 dimensions. So taking things from the piece of paper, from the page, into reality is a blast. What's really nice about, the way I started designing all of my pieces is it's all to scale. So I could take my ruler right up to any piece of steel, and as long as I follow this kind of grid that I'm creating, this almost matrix, it'll all line up precisely where I need it to go. Now, this process of taking from, 2 dimensions all the way to 3 is not for the faint of heart. It's hard. But one of my favorite quotes out there is you get good at what you practice. And if it's kind of cutting corners, if it's kind of cheating, the ways a little bit, it's just a good challenge to rise up to. And it's kind of good to do it the hard way every now and then, because when you're forced to do it the hard way, you got it in your bones. Now, these scrolls that I'm forging, they're the ley lines of the entire piece. Everything needs to go exactly where I designed them to, because they're supporting the stars. I really enjoyed, building structure into the piece with those lovely 1/4 steel fins that just kind of remind me of something aquatic. Once I had all these ley lines and scrolls established, then it was time to cut out all of the captures for the stained glass. Some concentric rings, I could just do plain Jane circles that are in line, but I really like the idea of slightly out of askew, an ellipse, if you will. Now, hold the glass between 2 pieces of steel, held off by just a little bit so it can have a little bit of movement in there. They work out well. So cutting them out, clean them up, it's a bit of a process. Now, I was really excited to do a water elemental piece because blue stained glass is one of my favorite. It's so beautiful, it's so vivid and just kind of luscious in its nature, especially in contrast to the rusted oxidized finish that we're choosing for these pieces. Now I have to be extremely careful, welding glass into place. It's pretty bizarre, but if you're really careful, you can do it. And I've kind of developed a little bit of a system to make that happen. Then once it's all welded up, just a little bit of finish work, and it was there on site. Where the client chose to put Cancer is a really beautiful little meditation garden where you have like double helical pathways that all lead central to where this pedestal is. It's beautiful, kind of in this wonderful bamboo privacy screen right out front of the Allegretto. It's just wonderful. I think I spent a little bit too much time in the garden there after installation because I found the space lovely and deeply inspiring in the way it fit into its placement. I'm very happy with it. I'm also really jazzed for the next one, which is Leo. Guys, I am so deeply inspired by this constellation abstract series. It's really fun to kind of reconnect with the stars that are over all of our heads. It's really spectacular. I'm deeply grateful that I get to share this journey with you and tell you the stories of each 12 of these. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And as always, my friends, thank you for watching.